Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I hope you're having a great Thursday. Really excited and thankful for you guys to have us on. Uh, I am really excited to welcome Jennifer. Jennifer, we've been talking forever. I love just all your engagement in the community. You are an incredible individual when it comes to handling tough customer conversations. And you've done it at outlets, you've done it in store, you've done it online. Thank you for having us, or thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me, Jordan. I am really excited to jump into this, especially this time of year. And I know that a lot of this came about because we were watching a couple of retail brands who were making some pretty painful missteps in terms of their customer experience. And it hurts me to watch. So I'm excited to sit and chat with everyone today about really how making that a little bit more customer centric is going to not only save you a lot of heartache in the future, but there's also a lot of opportunities to create some surprise and delight moments from it.
Absolutely. And I'm excited to kind of chat with you about policy abuse because I think this is actually one of the hardest things, right? Because
Yeah.
a lot of these policies, so whether it's free coupons, first buying coupons, returns, etc., they're all designed to attract and retain customers.
Right.
However, unfortunately, they open up loopholes. And how do you find that perfect balance, that right equilibrium to actually reward the majority of your customers, overwhelming majority of your customers who are good consumers, good actors, while adding friction to these bad actors that are trying to take advantage of the system, right? And so, kind of with that, how did we get here, right? And I mean, let's just kind of chat about it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So 2020 happened, and basically everyone started to think that, really the emphasis was on conversion, and it was on lowering friction, as much as possible in terms of conversion. And that was incredibly important when so much business shifted to digital only. And as things started to open back up in 2020, there was still this desire from a lot of the shopping public to really be able to shop where it made sense for them. And customers don't experience your brand in siloed channels. They experience your brand as a continuum, much the same way that you experience your relationships with other people in your life as a continuum, not just through email or in person or through text.
Yeah.
So uh, basically, it was trying to capture. This was also a really unique time in the sense that there were a lot of customers who were learning about new brands and were open to experimentation. And really, that's how a lot of the return policies that now are starting to cause some growing pains. That's how a lot of them were born.
Yeah.
Uh,
Fully
when
agree.
you are thinking about, when you're thinking about a digital experience, the one hindrance, that to that conversion is not being able to touch it and to feel it and to, you know, try it. So that's where we got there. And I'd say that there's also probably some of the others that also went along with that in terms of, incentives to try to convert more customers or to convert customers from areas where maybe there wasn't, your brand didn't have a lot of penetration before. Um, but I think when it comes down to it, um, it did set a precedent that I think everybody really has to acknowledge. You,
Yeah.
what we set out for customers, what we encouraged customers to do, that's what they were trained to do.
Yeah. And I think about like Amazon also set the golden standard of free
Oh
returns, 2 day
yeah,
shipping, and it transformed the whole industry where like I'm competing with a logistics company. I'm competing from a consumer expectation where I had to overnight transform from like for a lot of brands, brick and mortar to online. How do I
Right.
optimize this experience? And unfortunately, we as consumers were conditionalized, right? I'm used to free returns. I'm
Yeah.
used to these things. Hey, I never got my wrist slapped when I would order 5 products and return them back, right? And I think we started seeing some of these ways that consumers could kind of, I wouldn't say cheat, but maybe take advantage of some of these overly generous policies, also create cultural and also generational differences. So, like, even kind of the rise of like the TikTok try-ons and all of these different things that brands just unfortunately got exposed because they had to rapidly adapt to these consumer expectations that were kind of benchmark and set for them.
Yeah. And all of the all of the phenomena that you've described, Jordan, those didn't necessarily originate with customers. Those were part and parcel engineered by brands.
Mm-hmm.
So the influencer halls, those were basically the first foundations of the kind of influencer and affiliate marketing that we see today,
Yeah.
right? And you had a lot of budding, affiliate influencers who were doing those in order to gain a larger audience and get the attention of those brands, in order to work with them. So this was something that especially some fashion brands really positioned. And I think there's a larger thing at play here that the influencer halls and maybe some of the double dipping on the coupons, that's not the largest part of all of this.
Agreed.
A lot of this was death by 1,000 cuts, and it was lots of pieces over this time frame that were intended on making it easier to convert customers, but weren't necessarily always customer centric. So in terms of the timeline we have set up here.
Well, do you mind actually elaborating a little bit more on that? Because I'm
Yeah, of
sure you have
course.
some great stories on that. So,
Yeah,
like,
of course.
yeah.
So thinking about this, um, the impetus was on conversion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who is that benefiting when it really comes down to it? If we're looking at it, that's benefiting the brand. That's bringing in revenue to the brand, right? And it's ensuring that they're exposed to new audiences. And also then exposed to a widening community through those customers that they acquire. But some of that can be evidenced in, for example, how the term omni-channel has been utilized over the past 4-5 years. And a lot of brands, like you said, that were physical only had to really snap into being omni-channel, operating in multiple channels in a very quick amount of time. And a lot of those brands directed all of their customer returns, or as many as they could, to stores. Why? Because that was beneficial for the brand in saving on logistical shipping costs and some of the returns processing. And hopefully also there was an additional benefit in terms of customers being able to exchange um, while they were in that store environment. However, what has actually bared out in terms of percentages, Navarre did a big study on this earlier this year. In terms of the total overall percentage of orders that are returned, um, basically more than 50% of that happens in physical retail comes directly from e-commerce returns.
Oh, yeah. 1,000%.
Yeah. So basically what you're doing then is training customers that they have to go into a store to return to avoid, paying for something additional to send it back. That's not really customer centric. You haven't really identified if that customer wants something in particular, if they just want an exchange, if they might be open. So, a lot of these can start before the customer goes into a location where, resources are already stretched thin. And if you are taking your very valuable associate labor away from your shopping customers who are experiencing and purchasing the brand to service customers that might not necessarily have preferred to be there, that's probably not the best allocation of resources. And in the long run, you are costing yourself revenue.
Oh yeah. And I think one of the things to think about is like, and just kind of like moving, it's like things are done in a silo, right? Hey, instead of paying that $10 or the reverse logistics cost, let's go get a customer to get in their car. They might be busy, right? They might have kids. They might, we have jobs, right? We have life. I'm going to go force this customer to go out of their way for 30 minutes or an hour to go drop off a package,
Yeah.
right? Like, and we think about it, it's so done in silos. And I think this is a universal issue when it comes to any brands or any businesses is communication, right? But I
Yes.
think a lot of it is really neglecting some of the customer support, the customer experience, and thinking about it solely from a financial perspective, which granted is incredibly important, but it needs to come together into more of a ubiquitous notion, right? And there's an article that came out, I mean, 3 days ago in the Wall Street Journal, just talking about shoppers are fighting back on this. They don't like these things. They're going to other brands and competitors. And the thing that kind of shocks us, and I think why we decided to have this kind of conversation, is that like brands are treating it as an either or. Everyone gets free returns, no one gets free returns. Or I just saw REI just fired like a small subsector of customers, very, very small subsector of customers. However, that's the first, right? Like there needs to be a need to think about the segmentation that goes in between what do we do, right? Rather than just making these universal, unilateral decisions across the board.
Yeah. Uh, Interestingly enough, as we were talking about a lot of this, I was reminded of some of the first examples I had heard of basically firing customers that occurred, I think, more than 20 years ago now. And at the time, social media did not exist the way that it does now. But one of the customers that this company fired happened to be Joy Behar. And this was when she was on The View. And this happened to be a brand that at that time, she was probably the highest profile celebrity wearing this particular brand. It was a women's mid-market brand. And she was livid, as most folks are when they get emails firing them. And the difference is, even back then, she had a platform for it, and it did go viral, and it was very messy, and it should have been a cautionary tale. But now, more than 20 years later, we're seeing this play out continuously. I just posted today about this, where I have large folders on my laptop of videos that I've collected from, customers who are really hurt in terms of this feels personal. And that's the flip side here, because, when you're saying, yes, there are costs associated with this, I think there needs to be a holistic approach in terms of how does this stack up against, say, your customer acquisition costs?
Mm-hmm.
In terms of what does it actually cost to fire a customer, right? And so if you're actually going to fire them, you should be really sure on why you're firing them. It doesn't make sense to make an assumption, especially when that is really going to just have an exponential effect on your overall customer acquisition costs.
Yeah.
So, if you think about $10, or more like probably $25, $27 in terms of, processing a return, right? Well, if your customer acquisition cost, especially through your digital channels, is already probably 4 times that, I mean,
Yeah.
this might be something that you want to make sure that you can take care of, and then learn as much as you absolutely can so that you can prevent as much of it in the future, because the best policy abuse combat is prevention. If we're thinking about really going back and ensuring that policy is structured, starting with the customer and then working backwards.
Yeah.
Uh, so, in particular, what can that look like? Well, one of the big viral stories from this year is that there were several fashion brands in particular who had very high return percentages, and some of them as high as 60%. And they launched right from finding a lot of these alarming statistics to, we must aim the policy at them. And there wasn't really anything in between. And come to find out, with a lot of these brands, there were a myriad of issues in terms of the customer experience, especially around brands that were third party, retail brands that were representing a lot of different wholesale brands, and they didn't really have a clear idea on fit. There were even some brands that may have misled or misrepresented customers in terms of what sizes were represented in their digital images, for product, as well as their advertising. Um, and also, it is 2024. So, in terms of really having tools that work for the customer experience, you know, there's kind of not really an excuse to not be thinking about this. So that could look different for different things. First of all, it could start very simple. What's above your fold on your PDP? Do you utilize ratings and reviews? And moreover, in your ratings and reviews, does that information get aggregated and go back to your product team? You know, um, do you have an interactive, discussion with your ratings and reviews on your PDP? If your ratings and reviews are telling you specific trends on an item, do you mention those? Especially before you have to scroll below the fold.
Yeah.
And these are things that really don't cost much in terms of being able to have a really outsized impact on customer experience. And by the way, since we are talking about Amazon, this is already what Amazon is doing. Amazon is combating, high returned items by letting customers know upfront. So, like, if you are selling on Amazon as a marketplace and you have an item that is being returned frequently, guess what? It's probably not going to be listed for long, unless you really address it.
Yeah.
And then there are a myriad of great solutions that can take this further, depending on where you play in the market. And in particular, one of my favorite innovations as of late is in the space of Try Before You Buy, which again was premiered by Amazon, but now exists from third parties who are doing this, for brands, in particular on Shopify, and then I think moving to some other platforms. This would be ones like Try with Mira, who really have nailed the luxury market, and then Try with that's here in the United States. And these are services that basically do what luxury retailers have been doing for years. If you spent enough and you were in the know, they would basically allow you to have sent items and put a hold on your credit card so that you could try those on remotely and then just process that all back in one transaction. You know, and you know, there are offshoots into car services and concierge services that partner into e-commerce in different metropolitan areas, as well as 4PLs now joining 3PLs. You know, so if food delivery services can ensure, you know, that their return percentages aren't they're extremely high in terms of delivering perishable food on a, you know, regular basis, the rest of soft lines retailers in particular can definitely lower their return percentages without uh, inadvertently firing customers and, you know,
Yeah.
and really injuring them.
Yeah. And I think just for the sake of time, I want to start moving through kind of like what's a thoughtful process, right? You've done this in an omni-channel perspective, right?
Yeah.
I think one of the big things we're going to focus on, because it might sound corny, but I think this is a universal issue at any company: silos. Things are not
Yes.
done together, right?
Yes.
Online doesn't talk to in-store. Customer
Yes.
support doesn't talk to operations. They don't talk to finance. They don't talk to marketing, right? And so I'm curious from your approach, especially working in outlets and in omni-channel, right? Like, what are some ways that you were able to successfully bring together cross-functional teams to be able to come up with a cohesive, comprehensive policy?
I think it always worked best, you know, when you've got some folks either in senior level retail operations or in e-commerce operations or omni-channel or digital, you know, transformation strategy, someone who really understands that customers don't see this as siloed, you know, channels.
Yeah,
And,
they view it as
and
one brand.
I mean,
Yeah.
honestly, that's really all it takes, is that you need someone who has vision and authority and a position of authority somewhere, who says, why not? We should bring people together and we should leverage. And, you know, we talk about this in terms of policy fraud, but this is also incredibly important, not only in customer experience pieces of, I would say, hopefully going towards the unified commerce, you know, customer journey. But it's also really important in areas like, you know, other types of fraud, account takeovers, and you know, bad actors, really malicious actors, fraud. And that's because if you have those kind of silos, you are leaving usually your larger channel open to a significant amount of loss, you
Yeah.
know?
And I think one of the big things we see too is also design in silos. So we think about the changing of like the home becoming the virtual wardrobe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, like, for example, like a lot of women order multiple dresses at once, right? And then
Yes,
they'll keep one out of five, right? And
right.
that's become a normal standard practice. But for a lot of, let's just say, like teams, hey, that's an 80% return rate. We're losing a fortune. This customer is abusive, right? They're violating our terms and agreements. They're taking advantage of us. Where, hey, unfortunately, that's a normal shopping buying experience now, right?
Yeah.
And
I mean,
so, how do you? Oh, go ahead.
well, I was going to say, it's funny that that's an abusive customer when you're talking about it in a digital channel, but in a physical channel, that is you and me and everyone else standing in line to go to a fitting room,
Thousand
right?
percent.
Yeah.
Yep.
So this is where having strategy that starts with the customer and works backwards, really customer centric strategy, um, first and foremost, is going to be your guide.
Yep.
And so this could look like, depending on, you know, like depending on the price point there, that's where a try before you buy app can come in. And, you know, if you don't believe me in terms of how well that works, ask Warby Parker, ask Amazon, as, you know, there are a lot of brands out there that have taken the time to invest and put this in house, as well as now there are brands that you can go and seek out to basically run this for you as a service, and they run all the they run all of the hookup as far as the logistics, just for basically a fee.
Yeah.
And the conversion is crazy, so that's one way to go. If it is, if that is not within your plans, not within your structure, not within your price pointing, then it's okay. Are you absolutely sure that you have done everything that you can in terms of your sizing, in terms of content, in terms of leveraging customer feedback in a really actionable way, and through that building community? Have you done everything that you really can to ensure that what you are showing people in your PDPs is really accurately reflective of your product?
Yeah, I think it's a great question, right? And I think it's something that,
Yeah,
unfortunately, there's not enough time for anyone, right? So how do you analyze this? How do you take into understanding what is the root cause of some of these quote unquote abusive policies? Because
yeah,
unfortunately, it goes bi-directional. Some of the
yeah,
policies you set up for good customers, I think about it always in the word of false positives. False positive, false negative, because I come from a data science background. Like, you have a false negative because you won't catch something. You've automated a system. You have a return on scan, a return on delivery, and bad actors know how to take advantage of that. But I
yeah,
think some of the larger thing, and the way that I think about it a lot, is like, how do you identify that 2% of bad actors that do 20% of return? How do we add friction there for those customers? But your 30% of customers that are your highest value VIP customers that are good, and by the way, they return because returns aren't bad. It's not taboo. It's part of shopping. How do we
right.
make their experience better? How do we increase retention? How do we do lifetime value? How do we waive that $10 fee, that $7 fee, and communicate it to them so they feel special? I think is really critical. And just jumping into a little bit of like kind of the next one is like, how do you prepare for these tough conversations, right? Like, this was kind of like the genesis of like what we were really talking about is like we were talking about ASOS, right? We were talking about like some of these viral moments that these customers had,
Yeah,
right? Like, how have you communicated, especially working in luxury, right? Luxury is known for not selling to individuals, having strict quotas, right? If things are returned, sometimes depending on the brand, throwing the item away, right? A
yeah,
perfectly good item.
yeah.
So, how have you really planned and prepared and handled some of these tougher communications that you have with people that are taking advantage of your policies?
Well, to answer your first question there, uh, it is what a something that we be a complex issue, but it does come down to a very simple solution. You start by asking. You start by being curious. You want to you want to observe. You want to investigate. Everything that you find is going to tell you something more. It's going to tell you something more about your product. It's going to tell you something more about why you're seeing the kind of returns that you're seeing. It's going to tell you something more about who's shopping with you and who's converting and maybe who's not. And what do bad actors not want? They don't want the attention from being asked, you know?
Yeah,
And I'll tell you, like, this is a very old strategy, and if there's anyone out there who has a good portion of their business in physical retail, they're probably nodding along with me. When you talk about this in terms of customer experience teams in physical store locations, the number one go-to in terms of preventing, you know, uh, uh, things from disappearing, from preventing external loss is engagement. And it's really not that different when you're talking about that in a digital channel. You know, one channel doesn't get to assume that all people who do something are bad, and then the other channel you basically bears the brunt of it. That doesn't seem like a really authentic brand experience that creates resonance and community.
yeah,
In terms of luxury, oh yes, I have been through quite a few interesting changes with global brands, especially brands as they started to integrate, their different channels and had to bring together disparate policies. So it can be very challenging. Still, you give your CX leaders, whether they are in digital or in physical, you give them the leeway, you give them the ability to do what's right for the customer. And through them, you give your CX agents and your sales associates the ability to do what's right for the customer.
Yeah.
And that doesn't mean offering up everything necessarily at once. That's not what I'm suggesting here. It is engaging and asking and caring. And once you get that kind of discovery from the customer, you'll have a better idea of where you're going to go next, right?
1000% agree.
Rather than making a unilateral decision to crack down on bad customers. That's brand-centric language that, customers are going to smell a mile away and realize that, okay, so when you are marketing to me to get my conversion, you want to personalize, but when I have an issue, personalization goes out the window. Yeah. Brands that continue to do this, they're going to continue to see the fallout. And it's not necessarily that a pendulum has to swing one way and then the other. It's that I think also too, customers do understand if their favorite brands returns cost them a lot of money, right?
Yeah.
And they have any good commerce. What's at the heart of it? An emotional connection. Doesn't matter whether it's software or suits or shoes, right? And the customers that have come to you, have engaged with your content, have come back, they've got an emotional connection of some sort. And, if you communicate in such a way that you do allow, some things, or you work with people on a case-by-case basis, and if that is what you're going to do, then you need to have really responsive folks to do it in. It shows care, and customers will, I think they understand that not everything, necessarily has to be free, or they might understand that it's a balance between that and raising prices overall.
Yeah. No, I fully agree. Like there's no silver bullet, right? And I think you have to be transparent. I think you need to be honest and you need to listen, right? Like ultimately it's a relationship. And I think I really resonate with what you said is like everything is emotional. It's
Yeah.
all emotional connection. We're human, right? And I think that's one thing you have to think about constantly is the human element, the human touch. And so I guess for a lot of our humans online right now, what are they struggling with? Holidays, right? We love the holiday season. We love all the sales that happen in November and December. But what are we terrified for? The tidal wave of returns that come in January, right? Especially with the return window. So, a couple of the recommendations that we have is understand your return refund process. Is it return in store, return on delivery, in store returns? These different processes can cause confusion and disputes, and fraudsters know some of these tactics. Smart, savvy customers know them. Listen to customer support. Believe it or not, they're your front lines of abuse. It's very different than a traditional kind of credit card fraud. It's a lot of individual interactions. And then the last thing is also, by the way, you can give a great experience for your customers, right? Just like you add friction for bad actors, you can remove friction for good actors. And it's something that we work with a lot of our clients on, and something just to recommend is like, hey, let's waive fees. Let's tell them we're waiving fees. Let's give you an instant refund so you don't have to wait 3 weeks for the money to be back in the credit card. These small things are actually some of the best loyalty benefits that you can actually unlock compared to just living in like just coupon
Oh my
purgatory
goodness,
cyclically over and
yes.
over again.
Yes, absolutely, Jordan. And you had said earlier, in terms of, I find a lot of owners and brand operators who are very concerned in terms of policy abuse, with coupon fraud. And kind of my thought is, how much does it cost you to acquire a new customer? You know, is it worth potentially, in terms of, you know, getting someone to a second purchase or third purchase a month, 2 months, 90 days, and then some ahead of where they normally would have been in terms of their LTV?
Yeah.
I think that might be worth 15%,
Yep.
but why stop there? Okay. If you don't want to spend the time cleaning up, your email marketing from duplicates, why not take a different tack in um, offering some sort of referral incentive or some sort of promotional incentive? Send your customers out to tell others how much they love you,
Oh,
right?
agreed. I think we're
And
still relying
yeah,
on old
and then
platforms.
give them the discount for
Mhm.
that.
Yep,
You
agreed.
know,
And your customers are your best advocates and evangelists. They want you to be successful a lot of times.
right?
So
Absolutely.
yeah, so the holiday crazy season. So if you have any questions, but just to wrap up, like Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us. We adore everything you do at Yofi. Just so helpful in the community, really unmatched when it comes to customer success, customer experience, with just a wealth of knowledge, right? And so if anyone has any questions for Jennifer, please reach out to her. Please send her an email, add her on LinkedIn, whatever is most helpful. She's great and an amazing, amazing human being. From the Ofi side, we work with some incredible brands, JD, Koyo, Takova's, Quip, and we actually help with identifying and preventing policy abuse. So if you have any questions, we always offer a free bad actor report, just to quantify the problem and just show you what's going on. So with that, I want to say thank you guys. If you have any questions, please, reach out to us. And thank you for joining us, especially because I know it's such a busy season, and just wishing everyone a happy holidays.
Yes. Happy holidays to everyone. I hope that it's an incredibly prosperous, insightful, and resonant season. And I am thinking of you all during the next couple of weeks. And as we get to the end of the month, just remember, if we're doing it right, then their purchases become a souvenir of their experience with you, that
I
they
love
get to
that.
relive every time that they use it.
I love that. Well, on that note, thank you guys. Thank you. Bye.